I remember being really visually drawn to the way Delwater Gap looked written out. There was just something about it that felt very dignified. Part of their narratives were that they were able to do this on their own. You know, they had some recording gear and that they could write. And that whole notion, I think, really leveled the playing field for me and for a lot of other people. You know, it made it all seem really possible. Like, you hear a lot of people saying, like, I want to be Lord. Like, success for me is being Lord. Or, like, success for me is being Tame Impala. And it's an impossible goal to set for yourself, you know? And, like, you're setting yourself up for disappointment if you have that mindset.
I took 10 steps and then she yelled at me. I have for you a letter, won't you come to me? She signed it, Deidre. I'm sorry for your time.
Hi, I'm Delwater Gap, and this is the makings of an artist.
Welcome back to the Makings of an Artist podcast. My name is Sebastian Cowsill, and today we have with us the amazingly talented Delwater Gap. Man, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So it's been said you began your career in a storage closet at your high school, but before that, did you dabble in any music, whether it was an instrument you played in your youth or something like that?
Yeah, for sure. I played cello for a while as a kid. I think my parents thought it would help me get into Harvard. So I played cello, learned the good old Suzuki method, got frustrated with that. And then when I was in about fifth grade, I started playing drums with a friend of mine, my best friend at the time, George, who was a drummer. Then I played drums for about 10 years, and that was really my main musical pursuit. So I was in a lot of bands. I was in a Fish cover band. Played a lot of Blink-182 covers. And then I was in a band called Great Blue Heron for a bit. And while I was in Great Blue Heron, I started having the beginnings of an idea of having my own project. So I'd been writing a bit. And Great Blue Heron was based in New Jersey, in Morristown. So we were sort of by the Delwater Gap, and I started seeing signs for it. And the name made its way onto my band names list. And here I am today.
So you said you had to do cello and that was your first thing and you were kind of forced into it by your parents. But at what point did you start to enjoy music and kind of want to go in it further?
Well, I always enjoyed music. I don't think I really enjoyed practicing. And I think, you know, string instruments, bowed instruments are ones that you really do have to practice at for them to be fun. Yeah, I always really enjoyed music. I think I didn't really consider it being a potential career future for me until later in high school, and I started writing a bit. And around that time, there was a lot of artists that were breaking through on records that they had made in their own. So Bon Iver's record came out, and Tallest Man on Earth, and a few of these writers who part of their narratives were that they were able to do this on their own. You know, they had some recording gear and that they could write. And that whole notion, I think, really leveled the playing field for me and for a lot of other people. You know, it made it all seem really possible.
Mm-hmm. So you said before Delwater Gap, you played in a band, the Great Blue Heron. How old were you when you joined that?
Well, I think I went to a boys' summer camp, which is where I met those guys. And we probably met when we were 12 or 13 and started playing together. And the band had a few different names, but they were they were like my real first project I was in. And one of the other guys was writing, and I was not the leader by any means, but yeah, it was the first time I really shared music with other people.
That's what I was about to ask you, is what was your role in the group?
Yeah, I was just a drummer. I mean, they really wrote everything and arranged everything and made the records. And I loved just taking the back seat and playing drums. I mean, it was in retrospect a simpler existence than the one I have now musically. And I've actually recently been thinking about trying to uh, join a band as a drummer again, as a practice in just loving playing again. Obviously, right now, today is not the time, but when our world is back in order, I think that I'm gonna try to find a band to join as a drummer, play some
Right.
bars.
Hope you can eventually get back to your roots a little.
Yeah.
What eventually pulled you from that band, though, to pursue your own act?
Well, it was a bit of a long distance relationship to begin with. Like one of the kids was based in Boston, but one was based in Jersey, and I was at the time living in upstate New York. So we had this notion that we were going to practice on our high school spring breaks and everything, and make it work. And it was a great learning experience, but I don't think it ever really would have afforded us any sort of real career lifestyle, just given the limited amount of time that we spent on it. And I think that we all went to college and then just started doing other things. And one of the parts of that, was just like the splintering of that project, and as happens when you get a bit older. So
Mm-hmm.
it was more just the natural movement of things, than a real intentional decision.
How would you have said being in that band kind of gave you an edge in your own solo career?
It's a really good question. I have to just thank you first off, because I haven't had a chance to talk about this music. That's something that's really occurred to me to think about or talk about. But I actually do think it was really informative and really formative. I think that it taught me, for a while, Delwater Gap was a band for about 4 or 5 years. So I started it as a solo project, and then a friend of mine came into the project with me when I moved to New York, and it became like a duet. And then I added a drummer and a bass player, and we became a proper band for a while, pretty much until like 2016. And I think that being in those bands early on taught me a lot about being in a band, which is oddly increasingly rare. You don't see a lot of like real bands that are really busy, and at least I don't know many. I think a lot of the bands that I know are projects that are branded as bands are usually one or two people that
Mm-hmm.
are sort of creatively the forces or politically the forces, and then people fill in or they're hired. And um,
Right.
that's sort of sad to me, because I think being in a band is really hard, and it's really rare that you meet people that have really complementary energies. But being in that band as a kid, I think really allowed me to. It was my first taste of maybe ego in the musical space, and realizing that it's something that can be really dangerous, and realizing that the reason I was so happy in that band is because, even though I am definitely someone with an ego and I have a vision and I like things to be a certain way, because I had an idea of what a drummer should be in a band, I was able to just play that role and quiet that part of myself. And I thought that was really beautiful. In retrospect, that I think it's nice to try to have an attitude of like putting music first and putting the song first. And even though I'm not in a band now, it is something that I think still functions with collaboration, because I do make my
Mm-hmm.
records with other people. I make my records with two of my best friends named Mike and Gabe. And I think one thing that really works about our working relationship, us three, is that we seem to really know what we do best and what we should stay out of. And we have really distinctive tastes and really distinctive skills. And I think we're able to put our ego aside. And I think, speaking for myself, part of the reason I'm able to do that is because of those early experiences I had in bands, and learning the political stuff and the emotional stuff as much as when I play.
Mm-hmm. One other question I was going to ask you is why Delwater Gap? I know that you said that name kind of resonated with you during your time in New Jersey, going back and forth for the band stuff. And it was added to a list of different names that you kind of had in mind. But why specifically that name? Was it just a feeling, or was it just a process of elimination off that list, or what was it?
Well, I'd like to think that a lot of us have lists of band names, even those of us that aren't musical. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a natural order that they take. And I had a list of probably 20 or 30 names, and that one just ended up at the top. And I have since then realized that I am really passionate about typeface and fonts. I do a lot of my artwork, and I'm really inspired by
Oh,
lettering.
cool. Yeah.
I love rubber stamps, and it's just something that I really get off on for some reason. And I think that I remember being really visually drawn to the way Delwater Gap looked written out. There was just something about it that felt very dignified. I didn't know what it was at the time. I didn't know that there was a national park called the Delaware Water Gap. I just thought it looked kind of cool, and it had a little bit of a mystery to it. And
Mhm.
I didn't want to use my name, so it felt like a decent name to hide behind. And
Mhm.
I think it's actually aged well. It's one of the few decisions I made when I was like 17 that actually was a decent one.
Yeah.
I like it. It still feels like me.
Now you said it was a name you'd like to hide behind, and I saw you were quoted saying that you created kind of this moniker partly out of fear because you feel like a moniker kind of opens up that creative freedom. Could you kind of expand on this and why you feel it's different dropping behind a name versus dropping with your own?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a good question. I think it's something I've talked a lot about recently. As I have a few friends who have like really come up in the music industry using their given names, and I think it's a really different experience holistically. I think at the time I made the decision out of seeing what my heroes were doing. Like I said, Tallest Man on Earth and Bonnie Iver, and I was listening to a lot of St. Vincent at the time, and these artists who weren't using their names. And to me, I thought it was something that you just did, and using your name was more of like a pop star move. You're Michael Bublé or you're Justin Timberlake if you use your name.
Yeah.
I, um, I think it was both a stylistic choice, and I think that I think maybe in my head, I always thought that I could throw a project away if it didn't have my name on it. I could start over,
Mhm.
which I think is a good thing and a bad thing. I think it's good to not have the option to
Mhm.
throw it away. I think that it tells a different story for someone who has a name, has like a human name. It can scan maybe as a little more intimate.
Mhm.
But I think on the other side, having a project name can allow you to maybe world build a bit more. Maybe I think sometimes having a normal name can have connotations attached to it. If someone is performing under the name Michael and millions of people have a personal connection to the name Michael, like I think there's an argument that maybe that allows for less like full creative freedom, right?
Mhm.
So I think there's pros and cons to both. I think I still want to do a project under my name. I think I'd really like to. I think if I could like go back and change it, I would have used my name, but I also don't think it ever would have been a band if I had done that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if it would have even worked because I don't think that I would have been able to get people on board in the way that I was because I was able to like give the project to other people.
Right. It would have been had to be Holden and the whatever.
Right. And I think in a way they always would have been my employees. And I don't know that that would have like allowed me to have some of the really formative and beautiful experiences I had with people. Yeah.
Mhm. In general, too, I wanted to know what it was kind of like releasing a project only being a senior in high school and, before that too with your other bands, because I haven't ever had a guest quite with that perspective. I feel like it's a very vulnerable move, especially with the kind of music you write. You do kind of wear your heart on your sleeve with those kind of tracks, and releasing that at such a young age is a very bold thing to do.
I appreciate that. I also think it's sort of the most cowardly thing to do. Because I think that a lot of those early songs were things that I just couldn't say to people. It's not cowardly, obviously. I'm being facetious, but
Yeah.
I think in a way, like, it actually didn't feel that daring, because I think maybe the way I did it too wasn't particularly daring. I think I sort of made a record and dumped it online and just allowed anyone who wanted to find it, at least initially. I started taking it more seriously when I went to New York, but
Mhm.
um, I think that's sort of a really special thing about record making, which is not true of necessarily other like entertainment mediums like filmmaking. I think it's harder to just make films for yourself. Like we in music, like we have the Bandcamp record, right? Or the SoundCloud record, which I mean, how many millions of records have been uploaded to Bandcamp just for the creator that no one will ever hear? It's just like writing a letter and owning it, or putting a message in a bottle and just throwing it out. Like that's such an amazing thing that we're able to do. And I think obviously like the technology has allowed us to do that. And I think that's what at least the first Autograph record at the time was. I I was getting interested in expressing myself, and I had been dating a musician and she was working on a record, and I was like, oh, I could try that, and I did it, and it seemed like it was more for me and more for her than anyone else. And then,
Hmm.
I sort of came to this in a backwards way like that.
Right. What was it like then seeing at the same age, seeing that project kind of create some local buzz and be written about in some blogs and whatnot?
It was really cool. I mean, I was just talking to the first journalist that ever wrote about me, this guy Will Oliver. We're still friends on Facebook, and I was just telling him like I'll never forget sitting on my parents' couch getting an email from him. It was really simple. It was like one line. He was like, "Hey, dude, I wrote about this song. Here's the article." And I will never forget that rush. Just that like, ah. I mean, that's the craziest thing. I mean, still, the the bar moves for what like gives you that feeling, but just knowing that like you can affect someone is really wild. And
Hmm.
I remember that I'll never forget that feeling. It was such a crazy rush, and it was really cool. I mean, it was really cool. It was tiny, I mean, a few little things wrote about me, but it was really made me feel powerful and
Yeah.
like an artist. It's like
Yeah. Small stuff
because all of a
matters.
sudden it wasn't just for me. It's like okay, cool, people are listening, and
Even
that's got
better.
a whole list of other things attached to it. So
Hmm. One thing I definitely think has been great through your genesis has been the songwriting. You've always been able to write these very raw and emotional tracks. Like I said, you wear your heart on your sleeve. Something you said you've always felt you've been good at since, you could remember. What do you think is kind of attributed to being such a good writer? Was it something natural like, to you or?
hmm, I'm glad you think I'm a good writer. I appreciate that. I don't know. I think it was something I could like. I grew up with. I have an older brother who was really always. He was a bit of a wonder kid. Like he was really brilliant when we were kids, and um, he was like reading Moby Dick in first grade, like just complete
Wow.
prodigy shit. And I think that I was not a particularly good reader, and I didn't particularly enjoy reading as a child. And I think that we get naturally competitive with our siblings, older or younger, if we're
Hmm.
lucky enough to have siblings. And I think that early on, I wanted to have my own thing, and I couldn't read in the way that he could. So I started writing a lot, and it was just journaling, and I used to write stories. And I think as I got a little bit older, and I had to start writing in school, and English class was actually creative writing, and you get to a certain age, and it was something that I could do and I felt good at, and I could communicate and I could make people laugh and I could build characters. And I think I think that just came from writing a lot as a little kid and also just from listening. I was super quiet. I didn't talk to anyone when I was a child, and I think just listening allowed me to take in a lot. And then as I got older, I started reading a lot, and I think that like any other art form, you are what you eat, so if you read a lot and you watch movies and you spend time with creative people, like naturally you just absorb it.
Hmm. One thing I can tell you find important too is kind of the narrative of the song itself. How would you say the narrative, the way you write it, has evolved since you started?
I mean, hopefully things have gotten a little bit more dynamic. I think early on a lot of my songs were just like crush songs, about like liking someone and wanting to be with them. And
Hmm.
a lot of the new songs are still like that, but I like to think there's a little bit more depth and some more darkness, and maybe a little bit more about me too. I think I have started to write a little bit more about me in the last couple of years and my experiences rather than just sort of like putting some amorphous love interest on a pedestal. Like not to condescend my old work because I actually do really love all my work, even
Hmm.
my old stuff. I think that like anything else, like I think it's become less two dimensional. But it's sort of up to who's ever listening, really, and I'll never have a really objective perspective about it.
Right. On the flip side of things, one thing I heard you say in past interviews was that you used to not feel so confident with your voice, with your vocals. What'd you do to kind of improve in that realm and kind of gain your confidence there over the years?
I was just talking to I was just talking to someone about this. Yeah, I took voice lessons, honestly, simple as that. And the funniest thing about taking voice lessons is so much of it was unlearning, which is sort of cliche because I think that's true of a lot of what lessons are, or
Mhm.
therapy or any of the shit that you do that feels like on its face really additive. Like taking voice lessons, I learned how to breathe for about 4 days, and then the rest of it was like stop trying to sing like everyone that you listen to. Like trying to figure out what that natural voice is, right? And just returning to baseline. Like what happens if you just make a sound? Why don't you sing like you speak? And so I think that was really the difference. And then just playing more. I think I was really lucky to live in New York City at the time that I did because I was able to play so many shows that effectively no one was at. I mean, I used to play a show every week, and there's just so many venues there, and like CMJ was happening at the
Mhm.
time, and I was in music school, so there was a lot of people around me that really wanted to play, and so I was able to learn in public in a way that I think, in retrospect, was really, really productive. And because I think there's singing, and then there's also like singing into a microphone. I think that's a different skill, and then there's singing in front of people, and that's a different skill. And yeah, I was just able to play in these places every week, and so the voice lessons and then just playing a ton. I mean, I played hundreds of shows.
Mhm. These kind of elements, writing, singing, producing, which is something we didn't really talk about, are all kind of things you expect to learn when you start becoming a musician. But what's something that you didn't expect to learn that you have, whether it was, advice giving to you or something about yourself since becoming a musician?
Hmm, good question. I think. I mean, I've said the phrase a couple times, but I think the thing that I have been surprised by is the world building of it, like the holistically creative power that we're afforded if we choose to be afforded that power, as like entrepreneurs and creatives. I think for me, understanding that like when I first started in the music industry, I think I had a very old school idea of like what it looks like to have a career, right? Like you make some records, you amorphously get discovered, you sign a record deal, you put some songs out, they sell, you tour,
Mm.
you're famous, everyone's great. And like there was a version of that that existed at some point,
Mhm.
before I was in music, maybe. But I think what I was surprised by pleasantly was that like it's a lot more of a wandering, that especially now, like so much a part of me being an artist is like my merch and my album covers and my videos and like the way I present myself online,
Mhm.
like the way I present myself in a live stream and the way that I present myself at an event, or the clothing that I wear, or what I choose to share in these situations, and I think that like there's a very vast world of artistry to be had, and it's not as simple as just like making records and playing and touring. Yeah, it's empowering, and it's also diversifying. I think especially it's been really interesting in a time like this where the entire industry has ground to a halt to
Mm.
take stock of that again. Of like, my tours have been canceled, my releases may or may not be pushed back. Like, so I'm not putting out music and I'm not playing shows. So what still makes me an artist? Like how am I still a musician?
Mhm.
There's not like a certificate. I'm not like an MD. I don't have a piece of paper that says I am.
Right.
And I think it's like this is a really interesting time to take stock of that and say, okay, well, there's a whole world of reasons why this project is still alive or why I am still the creator I say that I am. And it's not as simple as like shows and records coming out.
Right.
That's something I couldn't have known until I did it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And until the world, went on its head.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Just a couple more questions we like to ask everybody here. The first is, what advice would you give to artists trying to make it today?
I think first of all, just like ask yourself why, why do you do this? Why do you want to do this? If you want it to be your life, why do you want it to be your life? What do you love about it? And I think the second question is, what does success look like? What does making it look like? I think that's a really, really important question to ask that I wish someone had asked me early on. Because I think to the point of the very like binary, like you make records, you tour, like I didn't understand that success does and can look different for everyone. And meeting more people that are like undeniably successful in music as I've gotten older, just met more people, like success looks really different from all those people for all those people, it's it's really crazy. I mean, and I think that's a good question to ask yourself early on, whether that's an artistic question or like a really practical question of just like, I want to make X amount per year, or I want to sell out this venue, or because then the goals become more attainable, right? Rather than saying I want to play big shows, I can say I want to sell out 2 nights at Bowery Ballroom. Great. Like that feels much easier than I want to play big shows, or I want to be like, you hear a lot of people saying like, I want to be Lord. Like success for me is being Lord, or like success for me is being Tame Impala. And it's an impossible goal to set for yourself, and like you're setting yourself up for disappointment if you have that mindset. And I think my third piece of advice is, if writing is part of your musical pursuit, just write as much as you can, like journal. I would recommend reading a book called On Writing by Stephen King. And he talks a lot about tonnage, Great book.
The last is, like we said, the world's kind of come to a halt and it's kind of pushed some things back for you. But when the world starts spinning properly again, is there anything Delwater Gap is going to be releasing, or anything we can see?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't actually had any official cancellations. I'm assuming things are going to be canceled, but I was supposed to be going on tour with an artist named Girl in Red in May, and we're sort of figuring out what's happening with that. Beyond that, I'm going to be playing some shows this fall, some headline shows. And beyond that, I'm putting out some songs that were supposed to come out in May and will likely still come out unless something drastically changes. So yeah, I'm rolling out a whole new project. I have about an LP worth of music.
Awesome.
Actually mixing right now. I'm literally going to get off this call and do some mix notes. And it's the best work of my life so far, and I love it. And I made it with some great friends, and wait for everyone to hear it. I had a music video shoot canceled, and I'm up in Maine now, so I just ordered a bunch of film, and I'm gonna try to shoot a video up here.
Awesome.
In the snow.
Exciting.
So I hope you'll see that video. But yeah, I think right now, like honestly, thinking more about reflection and sort of the existential and emotional part of this, and trying to like really meditate on what I can and can't control. And what I can't control is these shows, and what I can control is calling my grandma every day. So.
Right. Well, whatever you got up your sleeve, we are excited to hear it, see it, whether it's online or live or whatever. But thank you so much for coming on to the show, man. It means a lot to me. If people want to find you on the socials and whatnot, where can they go?
Just all the normal places. Look up Delwater Gap. You'll see me. Sultry, black and white, wearing a jean jacket.
All right. Well, everybody go look him up there. Go look him up on whatever you stream your music on as well. And again, thank you for spending some time with me. I hope you have a good one, man. Stay safe and stay healthy.
You too. Stay healthy.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Shout out again to Delwater Gap for coming onto the show. And thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, follow us on social media, and throw us some downloads and ratings on iTunes. Become a member of our Patreon as well to get these episodes a week early, as well as other perks like monthly bonus episodes, merch, and more. As always, though, we'll see you in the next episode.